Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated economist here. Let me get the camera set up there for you guys. So, got this one out of the Cleveland Fed, right? It's titled, "Do Longer Expansions Lead to More Severe Recessions?" And they kind of go into two different theories of economics here. They got the forest fire theory, and then they got the plucking theory, if you can imagine that. And that's what caught my attention. They actually titled this thing the plucking theory. Anyway, let me read you the forest fire theory, and then we'll talk a little bit about the plucking theory as well. So the forest fire theory, this is Jackson and Tibaldi, speculate that the duration of an expansionary spells is related to the severity of the subsequent recession. Liken the mechanism behind the relationship to the conditions that affect the severity of a forest fire. With forest fires, excuse me. With forest fires, long spells without the wildfires lead to substantial accumulation of dry debris, which will fuel a fire. And the greater the accumulation, the more severe the wildfire. The author reasons that during the business cycles, expansion's inefficient relationships build up between various actors in the economy, such as employers and employees, companies and their suppliers. As both sides face competition with aggregate conditions are good and less able to turn down the available matches, when a negative shock hits the aggregate conditions, or when negative shock hits and aggregate conditions worsen, marginally productive matches will turn unproductive and dissolve. The longer the expansion, the larger the pool of at-risk relationships. So if you don't quite get in there, when he refers to matches, he's not talking about like the striking matches you use to start a fire. He's talking about the matches like two things coming together and making a match. And what he's saying is that during the expansion, all of a sudden you have like, there's not as many matches out there, right? So like employers looking for employees, they can't find good employees, right? Or if a business is looking for supplies and they can't find the suppliers because so much demand for the supplies are out there, these are the matches that they're referring to. And then all of a sudden when the matches start coming together, when you can start finding a whole lot of matches, well then the matches that weren't, say, as efficient, like when they just hired a warm body, so to speak, you know, just to kind of fill the position, well, that warm body generally is probably not going to be the most productive person, right? And if you're not very productive, then guess what? You're probably not going to be stayed hired on during the downturns, right? You're probably going to get laid off. For example, in the labor market, when the aggregate economy is expanding at a healthy clip, as it is currently, employment rates might be low and firms might have a hard time finding the best workers for their job to need filled. Firms might go ahead and hire a worker who is not best fit for the job because the demand for their output is so high that they cannot forego even potentially mediocre match with the hope of finding a better one in the future. The longer the boom continues, the greater the number of less than optimal matches in the employment relationships that accumulate. Then, when the economy eventually is hit with a shock and falls into recession, the pool of employed workers who risk losing their jobs will be larger. In this framework, the duration of the expansion predicts the severity of the recession. So they're saying as long as this expansion goes on and people are still hiring all these people who they really don't need to, or they're just hiring these warm bodies, or you know, the supply chains are tightening up where you can't find as much supplies, the longer that goes on, the worse it is when that changes, right? So when all of a sudden it changes and you don't need these employees, it becomes like you really don't need employees. You don't need a lot of them. And then when the supply line starts coming back in, all of a sudden there's a lot of supply and you just don't need to pay that high price from all those suppliers anymore because there's so much out there again. So when there's a lot of matches, then that shows that the economy is slowing down because there's so much room here to make a match, right? But then as the things expand and you have less employees out there, then, or you know, less suppliers, then the matches are just not as frequent, right? So that's kind of what their theory is. And then when you have this recession, that's the forest fire, right? That's what burns out all the undergrowth. That's where all the layoffs and, you know, unfortunately, like, you know, supplier inventory builds up and they can't sell their stuff and they eventually have to liquidate themselves. You know, this is the burning of the malinvestments, right? The investments that should never have taken place. That person should never have been hired in the first place. You see what I'm saying? This is where the forest fire is taking care of the problem. Now it goes into the plucking theory, right? And this is written by a Duprays, Nakamura, and a Steinson. And this is literally like, this is the forest fire theory from like here to here. And then this little tiny section right there, that's the plucking theory. Right? I just love that name. The plucking theory. And it goes like this. The plucking theory proposes a different theory based on the Plucking model of Milton Friedman. This theory posits, P-O-S-I-T-S, it means to be factual, I believe. The theory posits that the economy is operating along a ceiling of maximum feasible output most of the time over the business cycle. However, every now and then it is plucked down by a contraction that could be due to a supply or demand shocks. In this framework, the size of the pluck predicts the size of the subsequent expansion. But the size of the expansion does not necessarily predict the subsequent recession. So anyway, I think that little plucking theory does not make nearly as much sense as the forest fire theory does, but basically what they're saying is that, you know, when the economy is running at its at full speed, like, right, if you have the pedal down as fast as it'll go and you have a little disruption, then it's going to slow down, right? I mean, because you can't go any faster than this. So yeah, there's obviously going to be a slowdown if you take a little element out of the economy, you know, like a disruption in supply chains, or, you know, for whatever reason. Then yeah, this full speed obviously has to drop a little bit, causing a recession. Now, just because you're taking out a little bit doesn't mean that it's going to be this huge recession. It just means that it's going to not be going at full speed any longer. And that's what the plucking theory basically theorizes. Anyway, you guys let me know. Maybe we should break this whole article down, kind of like we did the policy speech that we did out of the Fed. It's a pretty good one. I'll leave a link to the article down in the descriptions, and you guys let me know in the comments, all right? Uneducated Economist, talk to you guys later. Here, I'll give you a little shot of the river before I go. Oh, yeah. Here, we'll go down and take a look at the guy's sailboat here. Oops. Oh, don't fall down. All right, Uneducated Economist, talk to you guys later.